guys. Welcome to the SCRA Tech Startup Lifecycle series. This is episode one, structuring the business. So before we get started with our business, we got to know how to structure it. And I can't think of anyone better to have to kickstart off the series with than Alan Brown. For those of you who don't know, I'm Austin Sagas. I'm the operations manager for the SC Launch program at the South Carolina Research Authority. And Alan, I would love to introduce you, but I know that you can do a much better job than I can, and I don't want to disservice you. So I'm going to allow you to provide an introduction and let all these wonderful folks know who you are, what do you have going on, and what all we can do to help.
Well, Austin, first of all, I want to tell you and everyone at SCRA, thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm really excited about the title. I am the lead consultant here at the Columbia area office of the South Carolina Small Business Development Center. And our focus is to take entrepreneurial ideas and to turn them into professionally managed organizations. And so that's what we do. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, like I said, it's great to have you here. So to sort of kickstart, from what I understood with MBAs, running a business, managing organizations, whatever you want to call it, these large systems, there's four major areas that one can think about how to impact these organizations and these systems. And it's strategy, people, culture, and structure. And so, out of those four major facets in that particular ideology, we're going to be focusing on the structure, sort of the system and or the rules of the game in which all these other pillars, let's say, can be supported by and flourish or be harmed. And so I think we'll be exploring more of that structuring of the topic. So I'm going to kind of let you lead.
I'll start kind of where I typically start when a client calls me and says, Alan, I'm thinking about starting a business. Right. And so by that, I mean, let's start at the idea.
That's wonderful. I think Simon Sinek will be proud of that, of start with why.
Right. And quite frankly, that first meeting, my question is why? And as a myriad of reasons, I'm tired of working for my current employer, or I think I can make this, right? Or I saw somebody else doing this and I think I can do it better than them. Right. And so for any of those reasons, whether it's a reason because they see an opportunity in the marketplace that they can explore it, or they have an idea or disruptive product or service that they think they can create, my question always goes back to, well, what problem are you solving in the marketplace? And the foundation of my conversation with an entrepreneur in structuring their businesses, what problem are you solving, right? And because I fundamentally believe that a real opportunity has a problem plus a solution, right? And then, what you want to get out of it is also relevant. And so I asked the question, what do you want to get? Do you want to be rich or king? Or in a female's case, queen? And they were like, well, what do you mean, Alan? Do you want to get rich to the point where you're not the central figure in the ongoing operations of the business, meaning you want this business to outgrow your individual capacity? Or do you always want to be at the top of the heap, right? You want to make all of the important decisions. It doesn't get made if it passes through you. And oddly enough, I probably get about 50-50 rich and, versus king or queen. And a lot of the times the person who wants to maintain control is okay with having what we sometimes call in the marketplace lifestyle businesses. All right, they don't want to manage anybody. They don't want to have to take the risk of getting risk capital.
Right.
Right. And so they don't want to deal with those complexities. And so that's typically where we start.
To me, it sounds like you got to know a little bit about yourself, and about that future vision, especially in the context of a lifestyle business like that.
Right.
That involves you even more so.
Right.
And so it just sounds like before you even begin putting pen to paper on how to structure your business, you really need to do a deep dive onto what kind of manager or leader or owner you want to be.
Right.
You need to have a clear or some defined sense of
right.
where you want to be, and then to your point, what kind of control or to what degree of influence you would want to have over your business. And it seems like those three major concepts are just a good place to start when thinking about, all right, now that I have these precepts in mind, now I can begin to start to form some sort of entity or begin to structure my business. Is that fair to say?
Oh, that is on point, Austin, because one of the things that I try to communicate to entrepreneurs is the concept of intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And how you build it is how you build it. Right. If you build it a certain way, that's what you're going to get. And a lot of my conversations on the early stages are around, conversation I had today with the client, because we get, in my world, I have clients who have accountants that tell them to use the tax tail to wag the dog.
Okay.
Think about that for a moment, right? Use the tax tail to wag the dog, right? And so a lot of the decisions around how we set the company up and profitability are based on what is the tax impact going to be to you.
Right.
Right. Now, last time I checked, a good operator is focused on how do I make, right, the largest amount of profits based on the value that I'm capturing and delivering in the marketplace. But if I'm using taxes, right, to determine how I create value in the marketplace, that conversation is already muddled.
Right.
Right. And so it's conversations are like that around, let's be intentional around what we're building, right? What we're structuring. And if we structure it and build it right, we'll be able to take care of any of the tax liability that's associated with it because we were intentional in building it the right way at the beginning.
Agreed.
Right. And so in the concept as related to tech startups, I think is extremely important to understand why you're starting the business and why and what you want out of it. Because if you're looking at starting a business that's a high growth, innovative business, you're somewhat a disruptor, right? And in order to scale the business to the point where you get a substantial exit for the risk you've taken, right? The structure for that business is different from a business that somebody wants to be king or queen of it over the lifespan of its operation. Yeah. Right. And so having those conversations up front, right? What is the opportunity, right? Connected to the problem and solution. What do you want out of it? Right. And when I'll add this part, when do you think you want out of it? Right. Helps us to be intentional around the decisions that we make.
Yeah.
Based on some of the best practices that, you've seen, I've seen, that exist in the marketplace around what's happening in a particular industry in our market.
Yeah, no, wholeheartedly agree. Just overall, it sounds like we just need to have a clear picture of what we want, when do we want it, and how do we plan to go out and get it. Because when we compare the degree from those models to where we currently are at with our business, that's where we can see that gap and
Right.
then discuss strategies, method, actions that need to be
Right.
taken in order to potentially make that close that gap, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess I'll move it on to the next question then. So all right, we've meditated on where we're wanting to head, how much control we're wanting to influence. We might have discussed the problem or solution and how we solve that. What might be the next thing that we do?
So from there, I use a method called dual tracking. And the basic concept around dual tracking is that there are two objectives that we have to cover, right? As it relates to structuring a business or starting a business, I call those formation and launch, right? And so formation is around the legal, technical capabilities that this entity needs to have in order to accomplish what I want to accomplish, right? That's what type of legal entity do you need to have, right? What does your operating agreement say, right? Have you decided on an overall advisory structure as it relates to the team that you need to support your business, right? Your banker, your real estate agent, your accountant, your insurance agent, your lawyer, your IT personnel, right? Those are the formation concepts that we're going through and questions that we are asking on the formation side. On the launch side, we're talking about, okay, how are you going to make money doing this?
That's exactly what I was picking up on, because all the things that you were touching on first were, all right, so these are not necessarily actions that might add value to the value proposition, but these are things like the legal statuses, the certifications, knowing the right banker. Those are the support systems on which your value proposition sits.
Yes.
And if you don't have those in place, then your value proposition cannot be fully, let's say, executed, perhaps, or be offered completely to the marketplace.
Right. I mean, yeah, because those are the things that you don't necessarily need in place to quote unquote make money.
Right.
But if you miss them or you overlook them, at some point they can come back and bite you in the behind, right? If you haven't done them correctly.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you don't register with the IRS, like, yeah, you could probably make some money at some point, but if you don't file that paperwork, you're going to be out of business.
Yeah,
and then some.
exactly, right.
And it had nothing to do with the value proposition.
Had nothing to do with the value proposition. One of the questions that we that I tend to talk to a lot of clients or entrepreneurs about is owner compensation.
Okay.
Like, Alan.
I mean, is that like, are you talking about like, is that how I get paid, or like, can you expand on compensation a little bit?
That's how I get paid. But not only how I get paid, Alan, should I get paid? Or when, if I'm going to get paid, when should I get paid? Right? Because a lot of owners talk about come to me with the notion is I don't need to get paid because that's my investment into the business. I'm like, yeah, but how are you measuring that? How much investment are you making into the business based on the work that you're doing for the business? Like, and if you don't determine some benchmark or number, right, to peg it to, how do you know? And then when you get to the point when you need to hire somebody to do what you've been doing, right? How do you quantify that for the business? Where at that point it's not such a shock to the business that it hurts its overall operations and profitability. Right. So those conversations around, right, what value are you adding to the business as it relates to the work that you're providing, right? And does the business recognize that you have that value? Right. And that's
Very
always a
pure
great
concept right there, because then it's almost like you, in a sense, have to take yourself out of the equation, you being the owner, the idea holder, and then you have to also figure out a way to like treat yourself as if you would if you were an employee. And you're wearing a lot of hats there. But it sounds like if you're able to have the maturity to meditate on that for future opportunities, you'll be better suited.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
you'll understand your business more in terms of the value that a living being provides.
Yes, it does. And guess what? It makes easier, Austin, when your business gets to the inflection point where it needs to replace you.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it easier for you to determine whether you and the business are ready to do that. Right. From an emotional perspective for you, for a financial perspective based on the income statement, right? Because the income statement is a reflection of the value you've been adding to the business, right? Because it's paying you at the level that it would have to replace you.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm sure there are some people that would probably be listening to this and says, Alan, that's easier said than done, right? Because there are emotional aspects, right? There are tax aspects that, and I'm saying you're exactly right. But the point is going back to intentional, right? If you intentionally have these conversations going into your business, right? As you're operating your business, when it gets to the time when you need to make the decision, it's easier to do because you have a foundation to make it from.
Right.
Right. And it's not an abrupt what's the word I'm looking for?
I'm thinking shock, like an
Yeah,
abrupt
yeah, maybe
shock.
maybe that's a better word. It's not a shock to the business when it has to start writing a check at market rate because that's what you needed to do to attract the right talent, right?
Right.
To your business in this role, right? You can effectively pay for the talent at the rate that the market says you should pay for it, and then your business could bring back in return what that market labor will produce.
Right.
Right. Which is one of the challenges that entrepreneurs have, right, in letting go and bringing talent onto not all entrepreneurs, but some entrepreneurs, right?
Right.
But in particular to the type of organizations that we're talking to people about building. My assumption, and I could be wrong, but my assumption is that when we're talking about tech startup life cycles, we're talking about businesses that want to scale, right?
Right.
Businesses that want to take on risk capital to get there. And there are just certain structures that work best for the entities that are trying to get there, right?
Right.
From a type of entity, a corporation makes sense,
Yeah.
right? Because you got to have the ability to have stock shares, right? So if that's the direction that you're going in, plan on doing that, plan on the cost that's associated with doing that, right? And let's go make enough money through our business model, right, to be able to cover the costs to do that.
Yeah.
Let's price our products, right, so that we can meet the GP that's necessary, right, to cover the right? The SG&A or overhead expenses to have a profitable organization based on the pace that we want to grow our business and based on what the market can bear.
Right, right. Because I think one of the things that you're hitting on very strongly is often a economic misunderstanding sometimes, which is you're talking about understanding your business in the deep real term of the value that you're providing to the marketplace that
Right.
is and being compensated as such. Because I think what sometimes people get confused with is sometimes it's the labor they put in that determines the value, and that is not true. I could spend 10 years building a solar powered submarine, and it's not worth anything because of the value that it provides, which is very little. But I did spend a lot of time working on it, and I think that's a very
Probably
mature
spend a lot of
thing.
money too.
Right. And so I think that's a very mature statement that you're making is it needs to be and your financials need to reflect, and that goes from everything to your revenue projections to the price that you pick to your gross margin or gross profit expectations based on either A, what the value is that you're providing, and or B, what the market will bear.
Right.
And I think that's a very great point that you're making, and keeping that point consistent across your philosophy
Mm-hmm.
and into your details, like your accounting documents,
Right.
and maybe your financial projections, your price projections, whatever you want to call it.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
so in your experience, since this is a focus on tech startups, where have you seen the most tech startup companies? How are most of them structured? And is there a reason for that? Is that good or bad? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
I mean, I alluded to it a little bit earlier. You
Yeah.
know, the formation that a tech startup should take is a corporation, right? And primarily because, as I alluded, if you're looking at taking on risk capital, that's done through some form of share transfer,
Okay.
right? And so in order to do that, you need to be a corporation.
And that's the same thing as an Inc., right?
Yeah, that's the same thing as an Inc.
Okay.
Now, they don't always come in that way, right? And if you haven't formed in that way, right initially, it can be changed, right? Now, based on the complexity of your organization, based on the age of your organization and the resources and assets, how those have been named for your current organization as it relates to whether you're incorporated Inc. or not, right? The costs and the complexity of transferring those items and documents to the proper legal format can be daunting,
Right.
right? And that's one of the reasons why we recommend a Browse-It team. And when I say Browse-It, I'm talking about a banker, a real estate agent, an attorney, and or should I say an accountant, insurance professional, a lawyer, S, right? And so I go back, right? So B for banker, R for real estate, someone in the real estate arena, A, an accountant, I, someone in the insurance space, L for lawyer, S is general support, right? And general support would be someone like myself or someone at SCRA that's helping them to really scale and understand the complexities of entrepreneurship and their business in general.
Yeah.
And an IT professional. And so having those individuals wrapped around an entrepreneur to serve as a base knowledge of reference that they can get, they can get assistance with making, our vetting opportunities in insurance or issues or challenges related to those issues is extremely valuable. Because it just helps you to find someone that you can bounce ideas off of, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and a mentor would fall into that S category, right? That general support category, right? And so if you don't have a mentor, right, find a mentor. Find somebody that's seen and done some of the things that you're going to see and do on this journey, because it can help alleviate a lot of the pain that you're going to experience or could experience, and then help add context to the pain that you're presently experiencing.
Right. And I like that because it goes back to what we were saying earlier, where most of those people are, again, more of that support role that your business is going to sit on. And it's on that support network that you're going to be able to have the time and the confidence to be able to deliver that value to the marketplace that we were talking about. Right. And we might not touch on the more value proposition exercises per se, because again, this is structuring the business and building that solid framework. I'm seeing that we can't say that enough, is getting that team together that allows you to go into the market as strong as possible, to overcome hurdles, reduce risk as best as possible for you to deliver that value. Yeah. Now, and another thing I'll touch on that I think you said that I'm going to just call out is that I heard that, if you're someone who's looking to structure your business as a tech company or as a tech startup, Inc. is probably the best way to go. If you haven't done that, or you're wanting to do that, you mentioned that the process might be a little daunting, and you might have to dive into some of the legalese in order to move assets, titles, names, ownership around. And so what I'm hearing from that is let's make sure we do it right the first time.
Yeah, let's make sure we do it right the first time. Understanding that things change, right?
So what you're recommending is I shouldn't do an LLC because it's really easy, and then or easier, let's say, and then I'll convert to an Inc. later. You're not recommending that.
I'm not holistically recommending that. No. But I am saying, if that's what you need to do to take action, because I need you to take action, then go do that, right? Be done with it, and then embed yourself in the entrepreneurial community, right? That as you're going through that community, you'll find the resources that you need as quickly as you possibly can, right? Where somebody can have that conversation with you and they say, so how are you formed?
Right.
And you'll say, I'm a single member LLC. And they'll say, well, but you're planning on being a high growth company that's going to take on risk capital, and that will probably be through the transfer of ownership via shares. And you'll probably say, yeah. And then say, you probably need to change that.
Right.
Right.
Overall, we'll just add a little asterisk to that little statement we said. Yeah. But overall, taking action is better than nothing. To your point, I'm gonna go a layer deeper, because I've actually spoken at USC, University of South Carolina, and I've had this question come up to people who are in the tech space, but they might not have as much business knowledge, and so they get surprised and maybe even a little interested when they find out that they can build a business that has shares. So you can create insert name corporation, and the legal ability to own the company is through the method of shares, just like in the stock market, but not the stock market. Right. You can have 1 million shares valued at zero, and the value is zero. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because when I create a corporation, part of that discussion is going to be creating that ownership structure. And it's going to be through this ownership unit called shares. Can you expand on that a little bit more? And what should people be thinking when they're having that initial conversation?
Right. So I'm glad you bring that up, Austin. Right. So when you're thinking about um forming a company and you're thinking about it from the context of shares, right? What's critical to remember is that um, there are a myriad um, classifications. There are a number of classifications or categories of shares. We're not going to get into the complexity of that today, but as it relates to shares, you determining a number of shares that the company has um, is important. Um, and from the context that these are privately held shares,
Right.
right? And they're not shares that will be sold in the open market, right?
Correct.
Which is where we get our context and understanding of shares from, right? Via the stock exchanges. You know,
Right.
but we're talking about as it relates to ease of transfer between individuals and a privately held organization, um, a piece of ownership for a particular entity, right? And that's what we call, I own a share, right, of this entity, right, this particular organization, and through my ownership of this piece of the entity, right, that has value, I control in a aggregate sense what this organization does, right?
Right.
Who this organization is, what it becomes, right? And it means that I make the decisions about around the direction of where it's going, right? And from the perspective of the ownership of an entity, right, determines the capacity of an entity. Um, if it's me, you, and someone else, right, our collective capacity as owners of a company determines where that organization is going, because we get to make the decisions about what it does and doesn't do.
Right.
Right. And so when you have multiple entities that own a piece of this organization, you have to remember that those entities, right, are the cap or the capacity of the organization, unless they embed themselves in an entrepreneur community where they have a set of advisors or mentors that they rely on to make decisions and understand options beyond the knowledge that they have at the particular time.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the reasons I asked the question, right? Do you want to be rich? Do you want to be king? Right? Because if you want to be rich, then we want to embed you in a community of entrepreneurs that also want to be rich or who have become rich by making similar decisions that you've made or going to have to make, to help you navigate those decisions along your entrepreneur journey to wealth, or as soon as you possibly can, right? So that you can understand the complexities of what's happening there. And we try to do that as early as we possibly can, right? To present the awareness of that to an entrepreneur at the earlier stages, and have conversations around those, right? To have some aha moments, or to provide some best practices or tips, right? But then also to talk about some of the warnings, right? As it relates to owning a piece through owning a piece of an entity through shares. What we know from research, research says that business ventures, entrepreneur ventures that have multiple partners seem, do better than business ventures that are owned by one individual. Right.
Right.
Don't know, I can't explain the phenomenon, right? But research has validated that. Now I have some assumptions around that, right?
Right.
But that's one of the major things that you have to think about in entrepreneurship. Do I want to be a solopreneur, right? Or do I want to have people that I rely on, but who also help me maintain accountability to the organization?
And I
Right.
think that goes back to what you said originally. Again, when you sit down to talk about the structure of your business, that's that you're hitting on that point of the influence or the amount of influence you want to have over your organization. And that's going to play into the structure of your business, because if you have a co-founder, or if you want a co-founder, in that case, then the conversation we just had about how you classify the shares and or the ownership, the entitlement perhaps of that business,
Right.
will have to come up with a co-founder. And that's not
I like that word, Austin, the entitlement.
well, I would classify it in that you're entitled to the decision making, the assets, the liabilities, like you're entitled to it all through your shared ownership, right?
Right.
But again, that's going back to what kind of influence do you want to have, and if it's going to be shared, that's just something you need to think about. I want to spend maybe the final 10 minutes being maybe a little more proactive on the value prop side, and then maybe we'll end it there. So, we talked about sitting down with the three core pieces that you need to think about when structuring your business. We talked about, for tech startups, the type of business that we need to create and the team that we need to create to build around this company. And then we talked a little bit about the structure in a corporation that the founder will need to consider, and how that entitled share to the company is divided, created.
Right.
So now that we've done some of those activities, um, how do we go from there to, I guess, building that validated product? How do we go into that next step of validating the problem that we're solving, kind of separating ourselves from the bottom piece to now the value prop side?
The tool that I use and have found to be exceptionally valuable in the process is the lean canvas.
Yeah.
And so there is the business model canvas that exists in the marketplace. I found in this work that using the lean canvas helps to clarify things at an exceptionally high level and do it in a way that allows us to focus on what I believe are the 10 areas that every business should identify as it moves towards creating a service or product in the marketplace as it relates to tech companies, right? And so, those are, identifying the problem. I'm gonna repeat that: identifying the problem, right? I'm gonna repeat it again, and identifying the problem, right? And then marrying the solution to the problem, right? And I use the word marry intentionally, right? In the context of the nature of the partnership that should exist when you're attaching a solution to a problem, right? It should be though they should match so much that when you're talking to someone that has a problem about your solution, one of the responses they should give you is, "Where have you been all of my life?" Right?
Or the solution should be as refreshing as a Coke when you're thirsty, huh?
Oh, okay, okay. We could go with that one too.
Yeah,
But and so the lean canvas helps me to think, right, because not only in relationship to the problem or the not only you have the problem and solution, you also have, right, your unique value proposition.
right.
You also have, right, your and the way that I like the way that I like that they describe it is I'm going to date myself, right, with this example, right? So when YouTube came out, the way that they got people to understand what they were doing is they said, we are Flickr for videos. I'm gonna let that resonate for a moment. Right, Flickr for videos. Right, so for those of you who've never heard of Flickr, there may be someone out there who've never heard of Flickr. It was basically a platform for pictures, right, for picture sharing. Right, so YouTube said, yeah, this is a reference point that exists in everyone's mind. You know Flickr, right? Now I'm going to expand that by adding the term videos to help you get an understanding of what I'm doing visually, right? And you go, I get it, right? So your unique value proposition, your value proposition, right, should be simple enough to communicate in a sentence like that, that is fundamentally shows the value that you're adding in the marketplace, but that you can expand on, right? And I think I said it, I shared my value proposition as it relates to the work I do here with small businesses and entrepreneurs, is that we turn entrepreneur ideas and ventures into professionally managed organizations, right? And so we do our work in between those two,
Yeah.
right? And so hopefully that's communicated in a way that helps you to say, oh, Alan, everything that I'm having trouble with getting done as an entrepreneur because I had this idea, but I'm trying to turn it into this professionally managed organization. You can either help me do or point me in the right direction to someone that could help me do it. Yes, right. That's how succinct we want you to think about it in relationship to your value proposition, that you can give someone instructions on actions that they can take afterwards to get that problem resolved.
Right.
Right. And then you think about the channels. Where do you find those customers? Right. You think about, who those customers are. We think about cost structures, right? Revenue streams, right? And in connection to the lean canvas, right? You've done an excellent job of doing this for me, Austin, is that we have on the bottom of the lean canvas, why, right? So if you look at the original lean canvas, it doesn't have why anywhere on it.
No.
Right. But what we found is that entrepreneurs who define the reasons that they are going into business early on are the ones that succeed, because they're able to use that as fuel to help them go through the times when things don't go as planned.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, so for the lean canvas, which for all of the folks listening, like this is something you can do a Google search, you can read books on these, you can watch YouTube videos. There's a lot of great material out there to help fine tune your ability to complete the lean canvas. I do want to ask you some questions to clarify how
Okay.
one should look at the lean canvas. I have two major questions.
Okay.
So, Alan, when filling out the lean canvas, should I be as honest as possible with myself about my business and the answers that I want or don't want to write down?
You should never be as honest as possible, Austin. What?
I say that because, there are sometimes that there are some things about our lives, and in this case, it might be a business that we might not like. And I think we have to have the ability and the strength
Right.
to write those down and then learn how to deal with them in the canvas. Would you agree with
Right.
that?
I totally wholeheartedly agree with that. And the thing we have to remember is that we are, in a lot of cases, we are not our customers.
Right.
Right. In a lot of cases, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, right? We are not our customers. And so the way that you think about an issue or a problem or a need or a trend that is existing in the marketplace could be distinctly different from how the people you want to sell your solution to think about it. And if through the ideation process, which is kind of what we're talking about in the early stages of a business's development, if you don't accept that, what you end up doing is coloring your business model and your revenue streams and the way that you create value in the marketplace to reflect your own perceptions and not the perceptions of your client base or those you want to serve. All right. And so you end up off base, right? When you should be on base.
Exactly.
And then you have to go correct and move, right? We call it pivot, because we haven't taken a realistic, honest perspective on what the opportunity really is, and then taking the time to do customer discovery. Right? I didn't say that.
Well,
right?
You actually started to touch on my second question for the canvas, which was should I update the canvas throughout the development of my business?
You better.
So talk to me a little bit more about that. Why is this not just a one and done deal?
So here's why this is not a one and done deal. The only time where this is a one and done deal is when the business is dead. Right? When something is dead, it's not moving anymore. It doesn't have a need for any resources. It's not serving anyone or helping anyone. Right? But as long as something is alive, right, it's intended to help and serve something or someone. And the someone or something that it is serving isn't static, right? It's constantly changing, right? It's dynamic and it's moving, right? And in order to serve someone or something that is dynamic and moving, you have to understand it and then modify what you're doing, right, to remain relevant.
Gotcha.
Right. And so, I'll add this, entrepreneurs and business owners are constantly doing what we call experiments. They're constantly running experiments, right? They have a fellow friend entrepreneur that ran a marketing campaign and it worked, right? They have a fellow friend that has a new banker. I use the term banker, right? That helped them accomplish something. And they say, well, my banker sucks. I need to go see your banker, right? Going to see another banker is an experiment, right? Because you don't know how it's going to work out, right? But entrepreneurs are constantly running experiments. The challenge that I often see entrepreneurs failing at is documenting, right, assumptions around the experiments, right? Documenting actions, right? What they did in the experiments, right? And then accurately documenting the outcome of those experiments, right? Yeah. When you don't do that, it makes it hard to repeat it.
I was saying my eighth grade, my wife is an eighth grade science teacher, and she's thanking you right now because that's all based in that scientific method that we learn in middle school.
It is, Austin. And so don't get me wrong, right? I'm not brilliant. All right. I didn't come up with this by myself. Right.
Okay.
I embedded myself in a community, like I'm suggesting that all entrepreneurs do. And I asked a lot of questions, right? How did you do this? What worked? Right. And what I found over time is that, some person would say they did it this way, right? Some person would say they did it that way, right? But the processes and methodologies that they use seem to be similar, right? They might not have called them the same thing, right? But they seem to be similar. And then when I came across, Ash's book, Running Lean and Scaling Lean, I'm like, wait a minute. Let me read this right. Somebody's taking the time to document this, right? Oh, they're not calling it strategies, right? They're not calling it scaling, right? They're not calling it financial management, right? They're calling it running experiments, right? They're not calling, he in Ash's book, he talks about ARG, right? Where he talks about building a customer factory, and he talks about the process for acquiring and bringing a client through your business process, right? You know what we call that in sales? A sales funnel, right? So, right. And so what I learned is that, you can read 1,000 books on business and entrepreneurship. But really what you have to discern is what perspective the author is using in his or her book, and then what technical area of the business are they primarily referencing. Are they talking about marketing? Are they talking about financial management, right, and accounting, right? Are they talking about operations? Are they talking about HR and legal and compliance, and right? What fundamental component are we talking about, right? And let's dwindle it down to its simplest means of understanding and measure, and then move forward from there. And for me, what I found is that the lean canvas does that in a way that I can communicate with someone at the same level, right? The words that we use are the same, right? The concepts we use are the same, right? And there's a reference point that I can hand them or refer them to, so that when we communicate, we're communicating at the same level with the same understanding.
Yeah.
And when we make adjustments to their venture, right, to their idea, we're using the same framework, so it's easier to move forward.
Right.
Right.
Wow. I mean, that was a wonderful explanation and deep dive into the rationale, the justification, and the use cases for the lean canvas. And I just think in summary of today's conversation, what we've talked about is, before you start putting pen to paper, you as a potential tech startup or founder need to do some deep digging and meditation on some major aspects of your life, how you see your personality and vision and potential future being impacted and shaped by a potential business. We went into talking about building that intentional team that, although might not lead to direct sales, but is going to be that support structure that sits on your ability to succeed and accelerate as a business. And we talked about, on the value proposition side, about using a tool called the Lean Canvas that allows you to understand the value proposition that you provide, the problem and solution that you're taking advantage of and solving, as well as the other facets of the value proposition that are needed in order for your product or your process to succeed, like your channels, like your revenue model, like your cost structure, your partners, barriers to entry or not, all of those things, and all of that coming together beautifully for you to have a deeper understanding of your business.
Yeah, I'll add, I want to make sure I get these two in there, because sometimes they get lost in translation, right? Your unfair competitive advantage and key metrics, right? And I say that, right, because, Austin, have you ever heard an entrepreneur say, I don't have any competition?
All the time.
Yeah.
Or no one is currently doing this is
No
a
one
common
is
phrase.
currently doing this. Right. So I used to think that way, right? And I also used to think that if someone was doing it, it didn't, or if someone was doing it, it precluded me from doing it, right? And I will, give a plug for this guy because he helped me to change my mindset in this way. This guy by the name of Chris Hively, right?
Mhm.
He helped me to see Alan. Somebody's probably already doing what you're thinking about doing. But the key component of the conversation went like this, but they're probably not doing it the way that you would do it. And that's the difference. That is the difference. Right. And it opened my mind up to realize that, I could socialize my ideas, right? I could share my ideas with individuals who've been there and done that. And without the fear that if I shared the idea, someone would steal it and run off with it. Because then I realized, if they're not me, they're not going to do it the way that I would do it. So it still gives me an opportunity to do it the way I would do it. And if they're not me, because it's not their idea, they're not going to have the stick to itiveness, right? That it would take to make it happen, right? They're not going to have a bias for action for that idea because it's not their idea. They're not going to risk what needs to be risked to make it happen. And then for the key metrics performance, right? Key metrics part, we got to monitor performance of our organization, right? We got to have benchmarks and KPIs that tell us what direction we're going in. And so oftentimes we wait too late to add that to our overall structure, that by the time we get it, the reason we're doing it is because we're failing and we need to figure out how to get ourselves out of the hole, right? But if we do that intentionally with the bias towards successful actions, right? Actions that I call revenue generating actions, then the probability of us having a successful venture increases because early on in the process, we're doing the right activities at the right time.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, for that. I guess now it's a complete assessment of the Lean Campus. And
yes.
thank you for those additional clarifications. Anything else before we end our episode today?
I would just add that, if most people who know me tend to, have probably heard me say this at one point or another. Teamwork makes the dream work. If the dream ain't working, it's because the team ain't working. And I said ain't, right? Intentionally, not isn't, ain't working, right? And that's in every aspect of what you're doing, right? If you can find and connect with the right people, right? Everything that you want to accomplish can be accomplished. It might not get all done today, right, or tomorrow, but in the right time, it would all get done. And I would just say, I think, thank you, Austin and SCRA, for giving me an opportunity to talk about, structuring the business, right? And some of the key points and things that you need to be mindful of in the earliest components of structuring your business, so that those businesses can succeed, right? Because that's the context, right? Not just structuring the business to structure the business, but structuring the business so that it can succeed. So I appreciate this opportunity to come and share some of the things I've learned with your group of individuals, your group of entrepreneurs.
That's Alan Brown with the Small Business Development Center here in Columbia. And this concludes episode 1 of the SCRA Tech Startup Lifecycle series. I'm Austin Sagas with SCRA, and thank y'all for watching.